Well, good evening. My name is Roger McMichael. I'm the Associate Superintendent for the Carmel Clay Schools. This is Matt Sachs. Matt is with Cooperative Strategies. That's the company that is assisting us with our redistricting. They're an educational planning company. So this evening, we want to spend most of the time giving you opportunity to make comments and input to this process. So Matt will start by just very briefly going over where we're at so far, and I think most of you have seen the information, so we'll go through that quickly so that we can get to your comments. And so we'll just get started.
All right. Thank you, Roger. First of all, thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We really are taking in a lot of community input as a part of this process, so we appreciate you being here. Like Roger said, I'm Matt Sachs with Cooperative Strategies. We are a K through 12 educational planning company. We do not only redistricting, but facility planning, demographics. In the past 2 or 3 years, I've worked on redistricting projects in the area in Center Grove and Hamilton Southeastern, so I have some experience in the area. You know, I know that redistricting projects are a challenge. They're emotional for communities. You're here because you love your schools, you love your kids and where they go to school, and that's a good thing. So again, we appreciate you being here and providing your input. Like Roger said, I'm going to try and just do a quick presentation. You're all here because you filled out the survey already, looked at the scenarios, so I'm not going to spend too much time going through that so that we have enough time to give everybody an opportunity to speak if they'd like to tonight. So here's just a reminder of our project website where you can find the survey. That'll be open until 9 a.m. Monday morning, and additional resources. You've all taken the survey already to apply to come here, but if you're talking with your friends or neighbors and they don't know as much about what's going on, please direct them here. Or if after tonight you think of something and want to provide additional feedback through the survey, please feel free to go on and take it again. We're not going to limit you to taking it once if there's additional feedback that you want to provide. So again, why are we doing this? Next school year, the Orchard Park Elementary is closing. A new elementary school is opening on Clay Center Road. So we need to create a new attendance boundary for that school. Carmel Elementary is opening on its current site at a larger capacity, so it needs a larger boundary to support the larger school. And additional elementary boundary changes may or will be made to better balance utilization in the 2021 school year. And accompanying middle school boundaries may also be changed based on changes to elementary schools that feed into those schools. This is just the overview of our project timeline. We're kind of in the middle here with these November 4th and 5th community meetings. These are really just the important dates, ultimately with a recommendation to the school board November 23rd, and then they will take action on December 14th. So I'll go through each of these steps on the next slide just very quickly. We started with really a lot of background data collection and analysis and developing some preliminary scenarios, collected capacity and enrollment data from Roger and the district, and a lot of GIS data from sources with the city and the county. And with that, we were able to plot on a map where each of the students live, look at where they are relative to attendance boundaries, school points, roads, compare that to the capacity of each school and see which schools have boundaries that are overutilized or underutilized. And then obviously with the changes to the school facilities next year, look at creating or adjusting boundaries, and we can use those tools in real time to see the impacts to capacity and utilization percentages and demographics at each building. So we use that information to develop some 3 preliminary scenarios that we presented to 14 focus groups in early October, 8th, 9th, 12th through 14, each day and night. And we asked them some general questions to get their thoughts on redistricting questions in general, and then took them through each of the 3 scenarios to get feedback on those directly. And we did make modifications based on what we heard in those focus groups before we ultimately released the draft scenarios and the survey on October 26th. So community input, again, is a large part of this process. That's why we had the survey go live on the 26th. We had the meeting last night and tonight to gain additional community input. So after these meetings are finished and the survey comes down, we will compile all of that survey data, comments into a report that we can then give to the school district and the board for them to review and consider when they're weighing the recommendation that's made on November 23rd. And again, here are those board meeting dates. So I'm going to go through the current and each of these scenarios just very quickly, again, since you have all already seen them. But just to keep in mind when reviewing the scenarios, the school board adopted some redistricting criteria. And again, these are all to the greatest extent possible. And some of them will obviously conflict with others at times. So students will be assigned to their closest school to the greatest extent possible. The school facilities will be balanced relative to capacity, taking into consideration the demographic study information. So just with those first 2, if you viewed the presentation, there's a map that has the closest school analysis. You know, if we sent every student to their geographically closest elementary school, we'd have some schools that are 50% full and some schools that are 140% full. Neighborhoods and subdivisions will be kept intact to the greatest extent possible, and entire elementary schools will transition to the same middle school. So here are the current boundaries, and if you grabbed a paper when you came in, you can follow along if you need to. The green boundary in the middle is the current Orchard Park boundary, so all of that area is going to be assigned to a different school. You can see the location of the new Clay Center boundary, and Carmel Elementary adding an additional 220 seats or so next year. So we currently have West Clay at a high of 109% utilization based on students living in the boundary, and a low of Woodbrook at 62%. Currently, the 3 middle schools are balanced pretty well at 90% to a high of 94%. And I think we should explain why that exists currently, because when we're looking at each of the 3 scenarios, when we're feeding 4 elementaries into 2 of the middle schools and 3 into 1. In each of the scenarios, you see a situation where you have 2 schools closer to 100% and 1 in the low 80%. So currently, that exists as well, but in the case of Clay Middle, you have a school in Woodbrook that's at 60% with only 400 or so students there. So really, that's kind of like 3.5 elementary schools feeding into that middle school. Similarly, at Carmel Middle School, with its current capacity in the 500s, it had an enrollment of around 430. So again, kind of like 3.5 elementary schools there. And then with the 3 schools on the west side, you have West Clay, which is over 800 enrollment, Town Meadow over 90% utilized, and Collegewood close to 750 enrollment. So you have 3 there, but all 3 of those are the highest enrolled elementary schools in the district. So that's kind of why it's balanced, because you have 3 that are very full, and then 4 at the other 2 middle schools where at least one of them is is a much lower enrollment. And then the other thing, looking at free and reduced lunch, we have Orchard Park at 30% currently, which that school is closing, so that boundary will be redistributed. And then 20% at Forestdale, 18% at Carmel as the highest. So again, I'll just kind of briefly walk through the high levels of each of these scenarios, just in case there's anything that needs clarified before we open it up for public comment. So this is scenario 1. This particular scenario impacts the least number of students. You can see the yellow Clay Center boundary takes a large portion of the current West Clay boundary, and then we've shifted a little bit of Collegewood then into West Clay. So we had West Clay at 109% utilized, and then in this scenario, it drops down to 83%. Some other changes, Carmel Middle School, or Elementary School, again, a larger capacity, so its boundary shifts a little further south into the current Orchard Park boundary, and then the remainder of Orchard Park moves east to Forestdale. And with all of that moving to Forestdale, we've moved some areas of that school into Woodbrook, getting its utilization up to 87%. And I think the only other elementary change is some of the western portions of Cherry Tree moving to Carmel Elementary as well. And then in this case, the new Clay Center Elementary School would feed into Creekside Middle School. So it would have 4 feeders, Carmel 3 and Clay 4 as well. And looking at free and reduced lunch in this scenario, the high is now 27% at Forestdale and 23% at Carmel Elementary, 12% at the new Clay Center Elementary. We've increased slightly the number of elementary students that would be attending their closest school in this scenario as well. So moving on to scenario 2, we have very similar boundaries on the west side, Collegewood, West Clay, Town Meadow. The Clay Center boundary does not extend quite as far east into the Orchard Park zone, so some additional students move to Forestdale in this scenario. And then the northern, very northern portion of the current Forestdale zone moves to Mohawk Trails. And with moving those students in, we shift some of the northeastern part of Mohawk Trails into Prairie Trace. A smaller portion of Cherry Tree moves to Carmel in this boundary. And again, the Clay Center Elementary School feeds into Creekside Middle. So looking at utilization, again, we've reduced West Clay to 83%. The high is 93% at Smoky Row, which remains unchanged in this scenario. And middle schools range from 80% at Carmel to just over 100% at Clay Middle School. And looking at free and reduced lunch, this would be considered the most balanced in terms of elementary schools, with 20% at Forestdale, 19% at Carmel, 16% at Mohawk Trails, 12% at Clay Center, and 11% at Woodbrook. And finally, scenario 3. So this takes on a much different attendance zone for the new Clay Center Elementary School. We've left a larger portion of West Clay at that school and moved a portion on the far west side of its boundary down into Town Meadow. So in doing that, you can see we obviously have to move the Clay Center boundary further north and east to get it to a workable enrollment at that school. And we've also left the entire home place boundary from Orchard Park would all move to Forestdale. And then without taking, with Clay Center taking more of that center area of town, whereas in the previous two scenarios, we had Carmel Elementary School picking up some of those areas. We've moved that northern portion of Forestdale into Carmel Elementary in this scenario, and again, those areas of Cherry Tree. We take a small portion of the Smoky Row boundary into Clay Center as well, and shifted the very northwestern portion of Carmel into Smoky Row to kind of balance there. And then looking at Woodbrook, kind of the similar boundary with shifting from Forestdale into Woodbrook as in scenario 1. And with the boundary that we created for Clay Center here, since it takes up so much more of that center part of the district, in this scenario we have that school feeding into Carmel Middle School. So Carmel would have 4 feeders in this scenario, and Creekside with 3. Without shifting as much of West Clay, we only get its utilization down to 92% in this scenario. And looking at the middle school utilization, we have a range of 82% at Creekside, since it just has the 3 feeders, to 99% at Carmel with the 4 feeders. Looking at free and reduced lunch, with the boundary we had to create for Carmel with the shifts to Clay Center, it's the highest now in this scenario, and in any of the 3 scenarios at 31%, Forestdale at 25%, and the next highest, Clay Center, at 12%. So before Roger kind of lays out some of the ground rules for the public comment, these are just kind of some reminders I wanted to make sure to say. So truly, no decisions have been made. We're not holding on to one of these scenarios and just putting this out here just to check a box. I have literally read over thousands of comments on the survey. We've had now upwards of 2,700 online responses. Roger and I are talking or emailing every day about different things, about things we're hearing, to consider different options for refinement. We're also not voting on one of these scenarios, so it's not this, or this. Truly we're ultimately trying to come to the best recommendation on the 23rd. So it could be one of the scenarios for the most part, but these 3 things change, or we like this from scenario 1, but scenario 3 does a good job of this. How or if or can we combine those things together? So we're leaving the survey open to the 9th, and then again we'll review any additional responses that have come in that time. The response rate has slowed since the first week, so we've poured through a lot of the feedback already, but definitely still reviewing that, and listening to the feedback tonight, and then after all of the public input is considered, we'll make revisions and make our recommendation to the board on November 23rd. So with that, we're going to open it up, and I'm just going to pass it over to Roger for 1 quick minute.
Thank you. Okay, so the format this evening, we have 2 microphones in the audience, so if you would please go to the mic so that to present any comments that you might have, and state your name, address, and if you would identify what elementary school or middle school that your children currently attend. We'd ask that you limit your speaking time to about 3 minutes so that we want to hear from as many people as possible. I think that's about it. We don't want to get into a series of questions where we're just back and forth questioning whatever it is, the thinking was. But certainly if you have a question, I'd consider it like a clarifying question, and we'd be happy to respond to those. So with that, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, you can just step forward to either of these microphones here in the center. They should be turned on.
So, hi, I'm Erin Mora. I live at 13005 Deerstein Green Street in the village of West Clay, and my daughter attends West Clay Elementary. In all three of the scenarios, you adhere 100% to the criteria that entire elementaries will transition together to the same middle school. And in all the scenarios, you implement that across the board, no exceptions, not to the greatest extent possible. I assume that that's for socialization purposes to help students transition to the next chapter of middle. But the same reasoning really applies to keeping neighborhoods and subdivisions intact, because we have strong and deep friendships in our neighborhoods with our neighborhood schools, but that criteria is not adhered to 100%. It's instead qualified by to the greatest extent possible. That's my first point. So to the extent that there's any sort of distinction, I welcome any help in understanding why you're adhering so greatly to one principle over the other. But none of these scenarios keep the village of West Clay intact. And splitting us up across 3 elementaries and 2 middle schools will destroy our sense of community. We have strong neighborhood bonds over our shared schools that we have invested and supported since they opened their doors. The school board should comply with its own criteria and ensure that neighborhoods do stay intact and that students are assigned to their closest school to the greatest extent possible. With one minor change to scenario 3, you could move the eastern boundary from town to Hoover Road. The village would stay intact. And if capacity or utilization at West Clay Elementary are a concern, you have multiple options to deal with that. You could assign Clay Corner, which is a new development just built in the past 2 or 3 years that has no ties to West Clay, to Clay Corner, which is their closest neighborhood. You could also keep our neighbors up north of Maine at College Wood. So there's multiple options, and I would hope that you would figure out what you could do to potentially keep the village of West Clay together. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ender Jeriel. I live at 615 Willowick, basically between the high school and Main Street. And we have a daughter that's a high schooler, and we were redistricted once already, and the same criteria applied then, and we were taken from a school literally that we could walk to and transitioned into Mohawk, which was difficult at the time. So we've made that adjustment, kind of fell in love with Mohawk, gotten to know the staff, as well as Clay Elementary School. And in scenario 1, it remains intact, but in scenario 2 and 3, we're in jeopardy of that neighborhood staying intact, but now our daughter, who is a 4th grader, being separated from the rest of her peers at the elementary school. We were going to go on to Clay, and she would be transitioned to Clay Middle. So my question, at the last time this happened, there were some exceptions made for older elementary school age kids to stay with that peer group, and I didn't know if that was a consideration or not. And I know you can't answer that question here, but if we have that question, should we resubmit it on the survey again?
So the district has said that next year's 5th and 8th graders will be permitted to stay at their current building, and may consider additional exceptions as part of the recommendation, but okay. Nothing is being stated. And transportation may not be provided.
Hi, how you guys doing tonight? My name's Matt Wisner. I live at 11547 Perkins Street in the Guilford Park neighborhood. I've been there 11 years, and I became a dad 5 years ago, and we're excited to have our daughter go to elementary school next year. She would have went to Orchard Park. However, of course, Orchard Park's closing. And from all 3 scenarios, it looks like she'll go to, possibly, if the board votes on it, she'll go to Clay Center, which, how cool is that for her to go to a brand new school? That's awesome. However, we've been in our house for 11 years, and we see now this would be the 3rd redistrict. And when we moved in 11 years ago, we have a Carmel Middle School just only 5 blocks up the road. And made sense, like, hey, if we ever have a child, they'll most likely go to Carmel Middle School, right? It's only 5 blocks up the road. It's walking distance. Well, when we moved in 2009, that wasn't the case. Our child would have went out west. And then in 2014, when they redistricted, then they said, oh, wait, now Carmel Middle School, the neighborhood would go there. So currently, the middle schoolers go to Carmel Middle. So just as, speaking on behalf of my neighborhood, whatever, and Lord knows in 6 years we'll probably be at this point again and redistricting and whatnot, but I know it really means a lot for the neighborhood to be so close to Carmel Middle School, literally on Guilford Boulevard, and our neighborhood is Guilford Park, and it just runs right into our neighborhood, and it'd be nice to keep that middle school with that neighborhood. So, but my daughter's excited to go to a new elementary school. She's so excited. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate you guys.
Hi, my name is Julie Johnson. I'm at 10945 Beechwood Drive West, and I have 3 sons. I have one who's in college at Purdue. I have one who's a junior in Carmel High School, and then one who's a 6th grader at Carmel Middle. And I kind of wanted to tack on to what this gentleman just spoke of. So our geography, we went through this. We've gone through this. And I saw my oldest go to Creekside. We've lived in the same house for 15 years. Saw my middle son go to Carmel Middle. And now I'm looking at possibly my youngest potentially going back to Creekside or to Clay. Geographically, this makes no sense. I saw my oldest son deal with a 45-minute commute one way on the bus to Creekside. And to add an hour-and-a-half daily commute onto a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, to me, makes no sense. Geographically, I think you guys need to really reconsider this. To his point, for him to live so close and not be able to acknowledge that his child is going to be able to go to the closest middle school, it fundamentally goes against what one of your points earlier was. Secondly, I'd like just to mention that I think the students that are going to get the most disruption here are the ones that are the most vulnerable, and they're in middle school. And after the year we've had, to throw them into yet another disruption is unconscionable, and I really seek for you to consider that. My kid is going to be a 7th grader next year, and so he doesn't get grandfathered in, and I would like you to seriously think about what 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds are going through right now, and is it really a smart move on your part?
These redistricting maps deal with elementaries going to closest schools, and I don't feel like you guys have really paid a lot of attention to the middle school situation. My name is Emily. I live at 10,000 Westfield Boulevard. I have a sophomore at Carmel High School. I have an 8th grader at Carmel Middle School, and I have a 5th grader at Orchard Park. She is the last class to go to that school, and now our only choice is to go, probably looking forward to a 45-minute commute to Clay Middle School. Both of my older sons went to Carmel Middle School. It is the central middle school. I live centrally on Westfield Boulevard. I do not feel like shipping my daughter out to Clay is probably the best. You've got an elementary Cherry Tree that is 2 miles from Clay Middle School that ship all the kids to Carmel Middle. I feel like there could be some adjustments made to the elementaries and where they go to the middle schools. None of these scenarios dealt with that. They dealt with elementaries. They did not deal with the middle school. Yes, we have a centrally located high school. That's great. Everybody will meet up there. But this is not right. You need to address the elementaries going to middle schools.
Hi, my name's Erica Parker. I live over in Clare Ridge Farm, which is north of 116th between Clay Center and Hoover. And I also am kind of piggybacking on everybody about the middle school situation. We feel very strongly we actually chose to live in the neighborhood we chose because we would be going to Creekside Middle School. And I know a lot of my neighbors feel the exact same way. It's a very top-rated state-of-the-art facility. We would really like our children to stay there. I realize that's a problem, and I completely understand the people that are coming from the far east to come to Clay Center. But again, I think when the whole map was drawn, maybe there should have been a little bit more thought into the middle schools instead of the elementary schools. And I know that our neighborhood feels the exact same way. I know that I'm just kind of agreeing with everyone. I know you're coming from different areas, but we also chose to live on the west side to go to Creekside, and we don't want to be pulled across Meridian all the way to Carmel Middle School because that's very far for us to travel as well.
Hello, my name is Julie Griffith. Hi, Julie, my neighbor. I live at 10980 Beechwood Avenue in what was unincorporated, now part of Carmel, Lady Hamilton. So my sons go to Orchard Park Elementary, and we're glad to be there. We're glad to be part of Carmel, and I want to say thank you for putting time and effort into this. This is not an easy job at all, so first off, thank you. Second, I'm excited at the prospect of going to a brand new school. Moving from the oldest school to a brand new in scenario 1 is exciting and really cool for my kindergartner and second grader who will really get to use it. My concern, I guess, backing off of some of the others, is the middle school situation. So I'm wondering if we could choose a scenario just for the elementaries, and then choose a second scenario for the middle schools. So it seems like scenario 1 might be a great utilization effort for elementary schools, bearing in mind there might be a little bit of change for keeping West Clay together. But it looks like scenario 3 might be a better option for the middle schoolers. Would we consider changing that or redistricting? It would kind of change that last rule maybe of keeping elementaries together. That would be an adjustment, but it looks like that would utilize our middle schools much better and balance a little bit better too if we would consider that. Second consideration is transportation issues. Would there be a way to petition the school board if our commute is beyond a certain amount of time? So if our children will be on the bus for more than 30 minutes or 25 or 40 or whatever is deemed reasonable, could we petition to have our children go to the closest one? Just like we have a system that allows our children to be grandfathered, could we have that mechanism in place to keep our kids off of a 45-minute bus ride? Like I said, middle school, that's hard, and my children in some of these scenarios would be looking at a 45-minute commute, and I know I'm not the only one. So I guess I'm just looking for some flexibility and some kind of wiggle room on some of these rules to the greatest extent possible. Yes, but it sounds like the middle school needs to be rearranged or rethought out. And I think we're creative, we can figure this out and have our children's best interests in mind. So, thank you.
Hi, my name's Erin Zach, and I have 3 kiddos who attend Forestdale this year. I have a 3rd grader and then 2 first graders. And just kind of looking overall at all of the scenarios, one of the things regarding elementary that seems to stick out the most to me is just some unequitable percentages as far as the free and reduced lunch is concerned. Right now, Forestdale sits at about 20% free and reduced lunch. And the neighborhood that I live in, Kingswood, is slated to move to Woodbrook. And with the shift from our neighborhood to another school, it significantly increases the free and reduced lunch number for Forestdale in scenario 1. One of the things that I've really noticed this year, I'm currently on the exec board for the PTO, is how much parent support and involvement helps to drive a school. And I see so much that the parent involvement goes towards funding programs, helping with curriculum, supporting teachers, and it seems concerning to me that most of the elementary schools' numbers are 3 times lower than Forestdale, as far as free and reduced lunch is concerned. One of the things that I see, just looking at scenario 1 map, is there is a neighborhood that is north of 116th Street and west of Keystone that could probably swap with the neighborhood area that is in between 116th and 106th, and just east of Gray Road. It would really only affect Woodbrook and Forestdale. It would probably be an easy scenario for transportation. It would also bring that percentage to a more equitable rate. So when I look at all the districts across the entire community, it doesn't quite seem like that perspective was thought of, considering that in most of these scenarios, there's really only 2 schools that stay at a pretty high level. And I feel like it's really important to try to keep the same amount of parent support, financial support in all of the schools across the district instead of just leaving a couple out. So my kids would go to Woodbrook, and I know it would be a lovely school, my kids would thrive there, and my parent support would be just as involved, but it does make me worry for Forestdale, what that would look like to them losing such a large percentage of parent support.
Hi, my name is Michelle Fouts, and I live at 66 Monon Lane, and my daughter is a kindergartner at Carmel Elementary, and I'm speaking now because of what you were just talking about. My biggest concern is the balance, and specifically talking about the socioeconomic balance, which would include the free and reduced lunch percentages. And in scenario 3, for instance, Carmel Elementary, about 1/3 of the students are free and reduced lunch, and that really changes the school when you've got a large percentage of the students, that percentage is much higher. And in scenario 2, it's very balanced. The schools are much more balanced, and the free and reduced lunch percentages are more balanced between the schools. But with both Carmel Elementary and Forestdale in 1 and 3 are not nearly as balanced, and I'm not going to go into all of the reasons, but I think you did a very nice job of explaining why it's good to just keep that in mind when you're looking at to keep a balance between the schools in terms of that percentage. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Christina Rita, and I live at 12966 Brighton Avenue. And I'm speaking after these 2 ladies because that was actually the same reason that I wanted to be here tonight. I have a daughter who went to West Clay Elementary School. My son is at Town Meadow, and my daughter is now at Creekside Middle School. And I think when I looked at the criteria that first came through, I was first a little bit surprised to see that minimizing the impact to students was actually not one of the things on the list. I think that scenario 1 obviously does that best, but as I kept looking, I just could not get over the same thing that these women just brought up, which is in scenario 3, which after listening to the way the consultant described it tonight, felt like it was a scenario that was developed specifically for one neighborhood and keeping that neighborhood together, a neighborhood actually I used to live in. It would actually create a huge disparity across the school district. And I think that balancing out these schools is good for the entire community. So I really hope that we take that into account.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Breitweiser. I'm on 3012 Roll Shore Court, and I just thank you for the opportunity to share. I'd like to voice my strong support for scenario 2. I'm a mother of 2 children, including a son with special needs at Forestdale Elementary School. I would really like to keep the same support network for my children. I've already developed close connections to the school and its teachers. We have a well-written IEP with people who we know and trust to serve my son's specific needs, and think that changing in the school at this point, even in his early age, would have negative effects on him as well as us. Also, Forestdale is a school that we drive by 2 to 3 times a day. It's a quiet street, and it allows us to walk and pick up our son on nice days. Also, when they get older, possibly bike. Woodbrook is along 116th, where he would potentially be changed to. And of course, obviously, that's a very busy road, much less pleasant bike or ride, and further away from our home. While I really appreciate your priority to keep communities or neighborhoods together, like I've heard a lot here, however, I feel that Woodland Springs is 3 distinct places. There's a portion north of 116th, which I've never seen and actually have never met anyone who lives there. There's the portion on the east lakeshore, which currently attends Woodbrook, which totally makes sense. I'd run into a few of those people at the pool, but that's about it. And there's the portion which I truly view as my neighbors off of the west lakeshore, the Tilstons, the Shambaughs, the Neals, the Kesslers, to name a few. I know their faces, I know their names, and while we may share a common management company with the 2 other parts of Woodland Springs, these are my neighbors. This is my neighborhood, and Forestdale is the school in our neighborhood. So for those reasons, special needs, location, and neighborhood connections, as you go back and view the input, I would strongly urge to redraw lines in scenario 1 and 3 to allow West Lakeshore to remain at Forestdale. In scenario 1, this would have added benefit in freeing up a little bit of space at Woodbrook, which is at 87%. In scenario 3, both schools are at 87%, but they are certainly below some of the capacities of other schools. So thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Monica Craig, and I am at 11161 Westminster Way in Kingswood. I am here not really for myself, because I'm one of the lucky ones whose daughter's in 5th grader and is not really going to be affected next year, but my family at Forestdale is going to be greatly affected next year. And mainly it's kind of bouncing off of everything that Erin mentioned. Being one of the leaders on the PTO, we recognize the strength that comes from the Kingswood neighborhood, and that neighborhood makes up about 30% of our PTO. So it's not only the financial support that it brings into Forestdale, but it's also the everyday support of the parents that are there to help out the teachers and the staff. And I just feel that moving that Kingswood neighborhood out of Forestdale to Woodbrook, which is a wonderful school, and as Erin mentioned, our kids will thrive there. We just feel it will just leave Forestdale less equitable compared to the other schools within a 2-mile radius. So really what we'd like to see is looking at the different scenarios, mainly scenario 1, there seems to be an easy swap with keeping Kingswood with Forestdale, eliminating a section of the map north of 116th Street to go to its closest school, which is definitely not Forestdale. And we feel that swap would be an easy one to make to keep Forestdale the school that it is now and the school that we love. And we feel that the students that are there now could really use the support that the Kingswood neighborhood is currently bringing. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jamie Elliott, and I am at 10645 Highland Drive, which currently goes to Orchard Park, and Carmel Middle. I have 3 boys, one at the high school, one in middle, and one in elementary. I wanted to just say, like everyone else has sort of said, the middle schools are a big deal to our family. Obviously, we're losing our elementary. It doesn't matter. We're going to go elsewhere. But I guess I'm also a little worked up over some of the other comments. The PTO at Orchard Park is fabulous, and rest assured, wherever our kiddos go, we'll still be parents.
I'm going to follow that because I think there's been some gross assumptions that because we receive free and reduced lunch that we're not involved. I'm here and I'm part of my school. Sure, I can't be at every single event, but I volunteer, I give of my time, I give of my money, and I will bring that to any school that we go to. And just because I don't have as much as others, I'm not gonna give. And that's hurtful. So just watch your backs. We're your neighbors. We work hard. We love our children just as much, and we might not have as much to give, but we love them, and we want the best for them. So please don't make that assumption. SES, yes, it matters, and I'm glad you want balanced schools, and you want all of us to experience equality, and that is very important, but it's not the end-all be-all. Some of your maps are brilliant, and they take that into consideration. And I don't know, I'm really hurt by some of the assumptions that were made, and I'm clearly not the only one. So check yourself.
I just wanted to clarify something that I by in no means am trying to say anything in as far as one school or set of parents is better than another. Forestdale is actually already a really high free and reduced lunch school. And I want to keep the level of support there. My kids are moving. I'm moving to another school, and I love Forestdale so much, and I love our Forestdale community, and I want to keep the level of support that is currently there right now. I'm by no means, and I hope that I did not hurt anyone's feelings, I'm by no means saying that one set of families is more important than another. I'm just saying that on those maps, there is disparity added to Forestdale in the level of support that it will continue to receive. I'm by no means trying to hurt anyone's feelings. I hope that I did not upset anyone, and if I did, I truly apologize.
And I didn't either. I didn't mean to, but I do think that there should be some level of balance among the schools, and that's all that I was saying, is that there seems to be some imbalance in some of the district schools, and we're one community and we're one district, and it would be nice if we could have some balance among the schools, and that was all that I was that was the only point that I was making when I was pointing at some of the disparity and the balance in two of the scenarios.
Hi, my name's Julie Donovan. I live and work at Forestdale Elementary. This is really hard. Redistricting is really hard. I've been on the redistricting committee in the past. My children go to Carmel. They went to Forestdale, they went to Clay, they went to the high school. I actually was a West Sider, so I know how tough it is. And I just want to reiterate, like, I believe Forestdale is so open-armed. I'm pretty sure we're going to get that whole district. We're so open-armed and are ready to go for it. What I have a problem with is you have an area that has 3 schools closer to them, and you continue to bring them over to Forestdale. And I think you need to pay attention to what the kids at Gramercy are dealing with. They've got a school that they can get to that's closer, that is right there. And I just feel like you have to pay attention fiscally. We have the opportunity right now to take care of this and spread it out. And I know these women, I know they don't mean anything negative because I work there and it's a great school and we're so excited for the new kids that are coming in, whoever it may be.
Hi, I'm Erin Talafero, and I live at 1123 Claiborne Court. My kids currently go to Orchard Park. I will have a 5th grader, and she'll go to another middle school or elementary school, and that's fine. It can be Forestdale or Clay Center, and I'm sure she'll be perfectly happy. I came here tonight, and I know I'm repeating, but this is what I came here to say, is to repeat what everyone said about the middle schools. I really do feel like my children's quality of life would be affected by being on the bus for so long. I moved to where I moved thinking they would go to Carmel Middle School, and that is where I would like them to go. I'm sure the other middle schools are great. It just has to do with the transportation time, their activities being affected, and our family time. So that is what I'm here to say tonight. I know a lot of other people have said the same thing. I know all the schools are great. I just want to consider how much time we have kids on a bus and if they're able to do their other activities.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hamlet. I live at 621 Willowwick Road. That is actually just adjacent here to the high school. Very small neighborhood. We're currently Mohawk families. I'm here to advocate for my daughter as well as my neighborhood. My 5th grade daughter wrote an essay that she actually took the survey and put this in there, and I told her that I would come here and talk about a few of the things she put in there, and then I'd like to share a few of my own thoughts afterwards. But from her, she says, redistricting to a new middle school would take me away from my friends that I've known since kindergarten. This change doesn't just move our family for elementary, but also for our middle school, which is an even bigger deal for me. Plus, COVID. It's terrible. Not getting to see my friends in other classes this year, as you might not know. You can't see them at recess, you're, only in the classroom. So she's already, only seeing her core group of friends that were in her class. So then moving to a different middle school next year, it's like she wouldn't even get to say goodbye. She also is advocating for her little sister. Her little sister's in 3rd grade. She worries about her having to switch to a new middle school for her new elementary school for her last 2 years, and then again to a new middle school with very unfamiliar faces. Those are just a few of the things she wanted to highlight. A couple things that I'd like to highlight are the neighborhood that we live in. It's 3 streets. There's probably 20 children in our neighborhood in total that go to either elementary school or middle school right now. Think about 13 elementary school students and about 4 middle school students. A blip on the radar. We were just redistricted 6 years ago. It impacted many families then. Kind of seems silly to do it again when we're such a small number that isn't going to impact any enrollments. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Shockley. I live at 13431 Kingsbury Drive. That's in the Park Place neighborhood. I'm speaking to you tonight as a parent of children that attend Smoky Row to speak out against scenario 3. In the first 2 scenarios, the boundaries for Smoky Row are not changed at all and provide the least impact to all the students across CCS. For this 3rd scenario, there is only one small change to remove 2 neighborhoods from the Smoky Row boundaries, Park Place and Park Meadow. These neighborhoods are less than a mile to the east of Smoky Row, and children in these neighborhoods have attended Smoky Row for many years. It does not make sense to remove 2 small neighborhoods from the boundary when the other 2 scenarios kept all the Smoky Row boundaries fully intact. And these 2 neighborhoods have unfortunately been redistrict multiple times, and I think we're left alone with the last redistrict because it had been redistrict so many times with kids attending different elementary schools in 3 years, because they are two of the smaller neighborhoods. But with that in mind, these two neighborhoods don't have as many kids, and it doesn't make sense for one scenario to remove them out from Smoky Row. If the main goal, and one of the main goals should be of minimizing the least number of impact to students, it does not seem that this scenario 3 would make sense to move just two small neighborhoods when there are other scenarios that have less impact to that Smoky Row community. So we would just say, I'm speaking for just a very small neighborhood. I think just me and one other person came because we don't have that many kids, and we just really feel that when there's only one scenario that removes two neighborhoods, when we're less than a mile from our elementary school, we would really just appreciate consideration to keeping all the boundaries of Smoky Row intact. If it could be done for the first two scenarios, we think it could be done for the overall redistricting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Nyer, and I live at 1180 Westvale Drive in Jackson's Grant. I'm going to really second what a lot of people have said tonight, sharing a lot of those concerns. And honestly, when I looked at scenario 3, it kind of broke my heart, and the first thing that came to mind was political. If I'm being honest, there's a couple of neighborhoods that I feel like that was drawn specifically for them. And the elementary school portion does not bother me because it doesn't matter for me being in Jackson's Grant, but the middle school portion does. I'm coming from a perspective of my children are Town Meadow elementary students. Actually, we're virtual, but they're going to be switching schools next year, and we actually came from private school previous to that. I got out of private school and we moved into Jackson's Grant because I just really wanted that sense of community and my children to be able to bike and walk to their kids, their friends' houses, like I did when I was young. And so now in scenario 3, I'm speaking out strongly against, because for my neighborhood and the neighborhood next to me and across from me, everyone's, sharing the same concern that you're putting us across a highway now to go to the Carmel Middle School, as opposed to Creekside, where kids can, bike and walk, and all of our friends are towards the west. Our preschools, our pharmacies, everything we've built is on that side because we are physically separated by the barrier of the highway. So for that reason, we really want to stay in, the west side with the Creekside kids, just because of the social aspect. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Tingting Wang. I'm from 1204 Bramley Court, a small community called High Grove. We only have 33 households. I'm here for my daughter, 8-year-old in 3rd grade, and also for my whole community. Just like one lady just mentioned, they have a small community with only 20 kids going to school. We probably have less than that going to high school, elementary school, and middle school. And for my daughter, I told her a few days ago that she might need to go to a new elementary school. And she was crying that night because she does not have time to say goodbye to her friends, and she will have to move to a new middle school without seeing her friends again. All our social community are based on west side of Carmel. Her friends are from West Clay Elementary School, Collegewood Elementary School, Town Meadow Elementary School. That's where most of our friends are. Now she has to go to new elementary school and new middle school, and in all 3 scenarios, she will have to go to the new elementary school. And that's probably the minor problem compared to the middle school problem, because we think that we bought our house to go to Creekside Middle School. It's the highest ranking in terms of academic in this whole Carmel school district. Now we need to go to Carmel Middle School. It's a huge impact. And location-wise, it's also far from us, and we just feel that our whole community should be part of the purple region. And in scenario 3, just like one lady mentioned, if you can move the boundary of the purple boundary from 126 down to 166, our whole community will be very, very happy. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Hi, my name's Kirk Hunt. I live at 1216 Clay Spring Drive. I have 2 high schoolers and a middle schooler goes to Creekside. I also agree with the lady's comments, I think back there, regarding scenario 3. Scenario 3 sort of makes no sense to me. It's incongruent. It seems to have the worst, having students go to schools the closest to them. It really does seem to be unusually drawn if you just look at it visually, with many neighborhoods, or at least going across back and forth across the highway, where usually in a pre-COVID period of time, there's a lot of traffic trying to get across 116th. It backs up. It's going to be a real pain for kids and parents to try to get their kids back and forth to school. Thank you.
Again, since it seems like we might have a little extra time. I wanted to follow up on a couple of these comments. My first request to Carmel Clay Schools would to be transparent in your criteria. There's been a lot of discussion here about balancing things and other socioeconomic statistics. I would, if that is indeed part of the criteria or the considerations, I would just suggest that you make that transparent. I do realize there was a slide in a YouTube video that you had to watch 5 minutes in to get to the criteria, but I think it would be helpful to our community in helping us understand the rationale for your decisions if you could just be a little clearer about what the stated goals are here. There's a lot of people that are going to be affected very personally by these scenarios if some of them are implemented. I would urge Carmel Clay to please come up with some sort of, not just grandfathering, but exemption process where people can apply to go to a different school so they'll have the impact to them be mitigated if there's space available. We came from a larger school district, Wake County, North Carolina, where there's 150,000 students. They did this like clockwork. People were assigned to base schools, but if they wanted, for whatever reason, to go to a different school, if the school had capacity, they could apply to the school system for an exemption and they would get a spot if there was space available. I think that that would eliminate or minimize a lot of the concerns here. So just a suggestion. The other thing, to the extent that there's schools that are at capacity or capacity is a concern, another thing Wake County did was put enrollment caps. And if people move there after a certain date, or if a new development or neighborhood was built after a certain date, people that had lived there for a long time would get priority at the school. And people that moved there or neighborhoods that were built afterwards could be sent to an overflow school until space opened up. So just some other perspectives about how this is handled in other regions. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Judy Schwartz, and I am a teacher at Carmel Elementary. My daughter goes to Carmel Middle. We've loved being at Carmel Elementary, and we love Carmel Middle. They're great schools. Being in the district for 15 years, I've been able to go to other schools and see how they are, and they're all great schools. And I personally think, obviously, Carmel Elementary is the best. But the one thing that I want to stress is that in scenario 3, you have 2 schools that are going to be a fourth and a third of free and reduced lunch. And I'm not saying anything against the kids that fall in that category, but that's a lot of students for a school to handle. That's a third of a population, and a lot of those kids may only have one parent that they're living with, and that parent is stretched anyway to not be able to come in and volunteer. I love Carmel, and right now we're at 18.5% free and reduced lunch. I love those kiddos, but it's a burden sometimes when our school can't do some of the things that the other schools in the district do. And I think that's great that some of the other schools have a huge PTO. We are not that lucky. But the parents that are on our PTO and the parents that contribute to our school are amazing. But I think that scenario 3 really does put a burden on Forestdale and Carmel Elementary. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? All right, well, I've put the next steps up here as a reminder. Again, thank you all for coming. As stated, this is a tough and emotional process, but we really do appreciate your input and your feedback, and I want to make sure it's clear that we are considering everything that we're hearing, and we appreciate you coming out at 7 p.m. During COVID and everything. And if you have any other thoughts or anything else comes up, email me, go back on the survey, whatever you need to do to provide additional input. So with that, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks again for coming.
That's her. I kept looking at you and I was like, I know that's her, but then when you got up